Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to CJ's Corner. Tonight I have a special guest with me, Jeremy Lynch. We just went out to see the film Hell or High Water, starring Chris Pine, and we want to just chat about it, director to director. Jeremy has been involved in filmmaking for a couple years, is in the middle of finishing off the special effects for his latest short film. Welcome, Jeremy.
Hey, great to be here, CJ.
Let's talk about the film. Let's dive right in. What was the first initial impact you had watching that film? What's the first thing that jumped into your mind?
In unusual circumstances, I've never seen a trailer for this film. Didn't even know what I was walking into when I went to see it. All I knew is that several people had recommended this film, and I wanted to go see what it was all about.
You know, that's pretty crazy because I not only had people recommending it to me, but I got emails and Facebook things. People were like all saying, you got to see this film.
So it's stirred up a lot of attention in just a short amount of time then.
Very short amount of time. And yet they were not expecting it to do well at the box office. So it's kind of a grassroots movement.
I guess we'll find out Monday when the box office reports come in.
But back to your point, what was the thing that just jumped out at you first?
For a few moments at the beginning, I felt like it was setting up to be a drama. And then there were a few points that happened during the inciting incident of the film where I said, oh, this is going to be a comedy.
Wow.
and you know, so there are a few things that just were quirky to me, and I thought, okay, they're setting up for a joke. And then it went back to being a drama. So for me, it was very hard for me to get an idea of what I was really watching at first.
Yeah, and that's hard for an audience because when you're going to see a specific genre, let's say you go to see a horror film, you expect to be scared or startled or something. If you're going to see a thriller, you want to be on the edge of your seat often.
Right.
If you go to see a comedy, you want laughs right away from the beginning, and so on. So I understand what you're saying. It was definitely a drama. It did have some sordid type comedy. A lot of subplots had most of the comedy.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the comedy was what is known in the industry as sacrilegious comedy. Not that it has anything to do with religion at all.
Okay.
But it goes against the standards of society.
Sure.
So, for instance, the jokes about things being politically correct.
Right.
That goes against the standards of society, so therefore it's called sacrilegious humor.
Okay. You learn something new every day. I never knew that was what it was called.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, so you mentioned the fact that as we were coming out of the theater, you were talking about the pacing. Kind of reminded you of a Hallmark film, yet clearly it's not a Hallmark story at all.
Right, definitely. Pacing was very slow. It took a while to build up to to actually something happening. I think you could really cut out a lot of the film and still tell the same story.
You know, I think the term you used was it was like a movie of the week earlier. That whole style of production, you know, let's show as many close-ups as possible so we don't have to have big equipment to deal with all the big expansive scenes. Although there were some cinematic moments.
Oh, yeah.
Most of it was being shot like a TV movie. And I believe part of that's because they were on an indie budget. You know, small team of people put it together. Heck, even the credits hardly took any time rolling. The entire thing was shot in New Mexico. So they were on location, they were shooting quickly, they were trying to bang it out in between Christopher Pine's, you know, major projects that he's got.
Yeah, I'd say I counted about 10 shots that I thought were very cinematic or very visual. The rest of it felt like a made-for-TV film. But let's go ahead and talk about Chris Pine for a while, because man, what a performance!
Oh, I know. It was like the first time I saw him as a character that had no element of Chris Pine in it.
Definitely. You know, I'm watching the movie, and the whole time in my head I'm going, I know this is Chris Pine, but I can't believe this is Chris Pine.
Yeah, I believe that he probably took this to break any kind of stereotype or archetypal character development that he had always been put into. You know, always being the lead type of thing. Now, of course, he's a lead in this, but he's a different kind of man in this film.
Oh, totally.
Even his walk, when we watch him walk off into the distance, that is not a Chris Pine walk. He studied some Texas folk to make that work.
Definitely. He was very much a cowboy in this movie. And the way he stood, the way he looked at the other characters, everything about his being said cowboy. None of it said Captain Kirk. So very different role. I think he's done a great job of breaking out of the typecast with this film.
So I'm guessing, now I might be wrong, but I'm guessing he picked this up not only to break those stereotypical viewpoints of him as a character, but maybe he's hoping that it's enough of a difference to get him a nomination for the Oscars.
That would be interesting. And that would be the only thing in this film that I feel would be Oscar nomination worthy.
But not win worthy.
Okay.
I mean, I've seen a lot of films.
Sure.
I would not vote for him for Best Actor based on this role, but I sure was impressed with his acting and know that he's worthy of getting that stamp that says, I was nominated.
You know, and if he's ever done anything that was nomination worthy, this would be it. Because for once, he's not Chris Pine. He's actually playing a character that's so different from what anybody's seen him do before that, you know, this is definitely a huge accomplishment for him.
Well, and frankly, I couldn't even tell it was him until about 4 or 5 minutes into the film.
Oh, yeah.
I wasn't expecting that, oh, that's him. Oh, wow.
He did not look like Chris Pine either. You know, we talked about his tics, we talked about the way he walks, the way he talked, and a bunch of things, but he did not look like Chris Pine in this film.
The thing I noticed about that is that, especially like as in Captain Kirk or one of his spy films or whatever, you know, when they have that tight close-up with his bright blue eyes, did you notice how darkened his eyes were in this film?
They were a little bit, yeah.
I mean, they were doing everything they could to make his character uniquely different. And they succeeded.
Yeah. Actually, now you mention it, I was looking for those bright blue eyes and not seeing them.
Now, as far as the story goes, you know, you were mentioning as we were leaving the theater that probably the first half of the film, it was hard for you to really get going emotionally with the direction of the film. But then about halfway through, we learned the reason behind what he's been doing in the first half of the film. And that reason is directly related to his kids.
Right.
You kind of bought in emotionally to the character by that point, did you not?
You know, and it wasn't until that point. You know, as a storyteller and a filmmaker, I was able to, you know, watch the first half of the film and go, okay, this is the protagonist. This is the person we're supposed to be rooting for. You know, he fits the bill. This story's about him. But it wasn't until about halfway through the movie that I actually bought into the character and said, yeah, I want this guy to win. Which, to me, felt like it was way too late in the film. You know, if I wasn't watching this film as a filmmaker to actually learn it, learn something from it, if I was just going to the theater to enjoy myself, I might have actually walked out of the theater, to be honest.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
You know, halfway through,
folks, that's his hint to say, don't bother seeing this movie.
Unless you're a huge Chris Pine fan
and you want to see a different character. Yeah, good point. Okay. No, I buy that, though, because, you know, the point where I kind of got invested a little bit into him, and certainly I was far more invested by the middle of the film as you were, but I got picked up a little bit earlier when he was talking with that waitress. She was heavy set, very attractive, but he wasn't treating her like an object. He was just having a sincere conversation with her. And she was suggesting to him that she was available. And it wasn't one of these awkward things where, okay, here's this great looking, fantastic leading role man, because he didn't look like a leading role man in this movie.
No.
Versus this overweight lady that's trying too hard. No, she was actually sincere. She came across well. There was no objectifying on either part.
And he was sincere too.
By all means. And I was buying into that moment. And when I was buying into that moment, as she got up and left and he was going to leave a tip, you could tell that he was reaching for a 20 instead of a 5. And then he goes, and he puts a lot of $200 down.
Sure.
At that moment, I was kind of caught into the story flow because I now cared about him because he was demonstrating that he cared about her. Because within that conversation, he learned that she was having a hard time keeping things going for her family, and they didn't have much money, et cetera, et cetera. So he poured out from himself and made that happen.
See, and the way, what I got out of that scene is, wow, he's a terrible bank robber. But no, when hearing you describe that scene that way, that made it very impactful, and I could see where that was intended to come across. But for me, watching the film, it didn't necessarily leave that impression on me. I gotta, okay, he's a nice guy, I get that, but I'm not emotionally connected with him. I haven't invested myself in his goals enough to really invest myself in this story based upon that part.
Sure. And everyone buys in at different times. One of the hardest things for a director, of course, is to know what part of the audience is going to catch certain things at certain times.
Sure.
I remember when I made a short film called Family Law, which won several awards. I remember very specifically creating one major ending, but 3 sub-endings. And each ending was for a different audience type. I can tell you that people came up to me after the film and they talked about the ending version that touched them. And the highly intellectual people picked one. The people that were more emotional picked the other. And the vast majority of the audience picked the main one.
Okay.
I was able to speak into the hearts of different types of people at different moments so they could all buy into the ending.
Yeah, definitely. That's very brilliant. I think in this case, I might have had a harder time buying into this film because I feel like the film was actually made for people who are older than I am. I looked around the theater a couple of times while we were watching the film, and I'd say the majority of people in the audience were probably baby boomers.
Yeah, for some reason it really skewed to an older audience. Now, I wonder sometimes if the themes and sub-themes might have had something to do with that.
I would say they definitely did.
Okay, so we got 3 sub-themes that I picked up on. We had the guys that were mocking the whole politically correct movement.
Right.
I mean, that came up a couple times. And it was interesting to be listening to the audience to see who was going to laugh at those jokes and who was going to be shocked at those jokes, right? And then we had the ones about the right to carry.
Sure.
And the whole concept of, I mean, I don't know how many bullets were fired in this movie, but there were a lot of, there was that whole sequence of scenes dealing with, people trying to stop the bank from being robbed with all the right to carries. And then the third sub-theme was the whole anti-bank, anti-establishment type thing where, the banks are getting too big, too powerful. They don't care about any of the people, and they're just taking over. They're absorbing people's properties and everything else. So you got those 3 messages, all really pretty much balanced from a conservative type standpoint. But now we take a look at what is the main theme. And I'll tell you what, during 95% of the film, that main theme appeared to be a liberal theme. And it wasn't until the very, very end that they put a little twist on it that turned it into a conservative theme. But if you didn't pay attention to that one twist, you walked away with the liberal theme.
Right.
And I'm talking, of course, about the whole theme of justifying the ends justifying the means. And in this case, all the weird things that they did in the film that were illegal. Can you tell I'm trying not to? I'm trying not to give it away.
We're trying to stay spoiler free here.
Everything they did somehow was justified in the fact that the end result was going to be taking care of his kids that he wasn't able to take care of in any other way. Now, to me, that's definitely what the main focal point of the theme was. What are your thoughts on all that?
Well, you brought up that point when you were talking about it before. Earlier on, you'd mentioned that this whole theme of justifying the means by the end, up until the very last 5 minutes of the film, where they had a conversation that turned everything around.
Right, right, because he admits. Well, I know, is this a spoiler alert here?
Yeah, don't give it away. They had a conversation. They said something that turned the theme of the movie completely around. Now,
well, okay, but let me at least say that by the end of the film, the main character understood that he had to live with the consequences of his choices.
Okay.
So it was consequence-based.
Sure.
Instead of just saying, oh, well, we can justify whatever as long as the end turns out.
Right.
Instead, we're going to have to live by the consequences regardless of what our choices are.
Well, and for me, it had happened after the movie was over. If that makes sense. The movie obviously wasn't over.
Well, yeah, we were in what we would think of as the epilogue.
Sure.
Even though the theme hadn't resolved yet. Mm-hmm. Now, usually the theme resolves well before the epilogue.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, but let's wrap this up just for a moment here.
Sure.
Would you recommend the film or not recommend the film? Is there any redeeming quality? I mean, you said you would have walked out if you didn't have to watch the whole movie because of our conversation.
Right.
You would have already walked out of the film.
I probably would have walked out after the first half of the film, to be honest. The last 3 or 4 scenes of the film, I thought were I could totally get into. I could actually follow what was going on and feel emotionally involved with what was going on.
Okay, so first of all, you're an action junkie. We know that. So we'll just admit that right up front. However, I will say that they tried to salt this film together almost like the building of a thriller. They gave you a little hint in the beginning, 10 minutes, and then another little hint 10 minutes later,
Sure.
and another little... And the hints, by the time you get 2/3 of the way through the film, you now really understand the goals of the main character.
Yeah.
Most films that grab us and grip us right away, we understand the main character's goal immediately.
Absolutely.
And then we watch him try and work it out. Mm-hmm. In this case, we don't really know the goal until 2/3 of the way through the film.
No, not at all. And that's why it was hard for me to get involved and actually invest in this character.
Right, you couldn't root for him because you didn't know why you would be rooting for him.
No, I didn't really know what he was trying to do. I didn't know the big picture of what he was trying to do.
Christopher Pine did a fantastic job. If you're a fan of his,
yeah,
you definitely want to see the film and watch his performance. You'll be amazed at the character. The rest of the film, this could have been a 1 hour short, and it would have been a much stronger film. All right, well, Jeremy, thank you for participating today and helping us out with this. I appreciate
pleasure.
it.
Thanks for having me, CJ.
Not a problem. All right, well, that's it for CJ's Corner today. I hope you all have a great evening.